Introducing the first ever Grand Highlander, a mid-size SUV with the ideal combination of space, performance, style, and advanced tech. The roomy Grand Highlander boasts 3 spacious rows with available seating for up to 8. Its available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain, unlimited and platinum trims, delivers the power, acceleration, and efficiency so your family can take on any adventure. There's even a standard digital key, a panoramic view mirror, and a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen, so you always arrive on time. Live life grander in the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander.
It's football season, and now you can get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, January 10th here. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz and Mike Wright.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
The offseason is here, boys.
We are living a new life, people, in 2024, and around the Fantasy Footballers parts, this is offseason, but when you really break it down, not a lot has changed.
Not for this show.
Dynasty Podcast still going, main show still going, DFS and betting's going. You guys still do Spitballers, still do Footcast. We're still 5 days a week if you break it down.
Yeah. It's a lot, but that's all right. It's a good time, and we are in a great part of the season.
Yes. Did you guys get a chance to watch Michigan and Washington?
I did. I did. The game was it ended up being a good game. It looked like we were en route to just a real bad football game, a blowout. Thankfully, on the short field, I can't remember, was it a turnover right away after the 2 touchdowns? Or no, it was like a return, and Michigan got right down, but then they held them to a field goal, and then Washington made it a game. But old Penix, when did he get hurt? At what point? Like, I wasn't locked into the game; it was just kind of on in the background for me. But he was by the end of that game.
Yeah, the second half, at some point, he got kind of stepped up, like, and rolled up on when he was in the pocket. And then he got hit in the ribs.
Okay.
So, like, by the fourth quarter, he was hurting out there.
Oh, yeah. He looked like a guy who, I get it, you're letting him finish out, but if you actually wanted to win that football game, he needed to not be out on the field. He was terrified of getting hit. His throws were inaccurate after getting hurt.
He will be an interesting prospect when we get to... We're going to get to think about prospects like 5 different ways. And over the course of the next couple of months, I'm going to be totally in, totally out. I can just see myself because, one, he's old. And usually we peg any quarterback that's old as it's bad. 2, we don't have a lot of left-handed prospects to go off of. And so I see a lot of people, I don't know if you guys have seen those, where they just reverse the film and show him as a right-handed thrower, which is interesting. But
it doesn't help. It's still an ugly release. But so, that doesn't mean that it won't work. It's just it is aesthetically not pleasing.
I will say, though, as a Falcons fan and as someone who watched Michael Vick growing up, just him flicking the ball.
Oh gosh, Vick! I was going to say of the guys who have just the most satisfying throw, Vick is very near the top. That thing is effortless and just the tightest spiral. Whew, Michael Vick throwing was great.
Yes. And so I think a lot of with his prospect profile, people are going to be like, well, look what Tua did. It's like, well, that's the only left-handed prospect that we're working with here. So his will be interesting. It was, for me, great to watch. You kind of knew Michigan was going to pull away. It just kind of had that feel of like, okay, this team and way it's going to go. But we're going to, in a second, talk more about college film because I think that's a big question in this season. Like, how do you analyze college film and look at it differently? But on this episode, we will be doing a rookie review, talking about quarterbacks from this past season. Our boy CJ Stroud, who is the AFC South champion.
Yeah, baby.
We'll be talking about him, talking about other quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, like what do we do with him with only 4 games? And then the running backs as well. So rookie review on this episode. And we've got a lot of Dynasty content coming out, including the Dynasty Pass, which goes live on Super Bowl Sunday. Betz and I don't know if you know about this, Mike. We had a little meeting this morning
I heard.
on the East Coast.
I love it.
A meeting of the minds.
So
Very serious, of course.
Huge HR meeting. I mean, we just went through everything.
I've started compiling my lists of players to watch that, just in order. So I am very excited because that is starting this week.
I looked back at our notes a year ago when we started this process. So every year, January, we turn the page, and I wrote down a player, and I said, I don't know why I like this player. It's just his name, but Dontavian Wicks. I really like this guy.
Well,
Great name.
hello.
I know. So it is funny. And then you're also looking at players that could have declared last year, like Blake Corum was in the conversation, went back to Michigan, and now he's going to be a player this year. Rome Odunze out of Washington, same thing. He was in the list last year of players that we were going to talk about, and then he went back to college. So we're about to get the full list of players that are committing, and they still have a chance, but there's a lot of moving parts in Dynasty, and I'm excited to talk about these players, figure out where they're at. So Dynasty Pass will be live on Super Bowl Sunday, but here's my quick question. When watching college film, is there anything you guys keep in mind? Because you're going to get hit with so many different clips over the next couple of weeks and months from, a Twitter timeline to YouTube. So I'll start with you, Mike. What do you look for in college film? Not like specifically traits, but is there any principles that you could share as you go into this process?
Let's see. I guess I could share it's the combination of watching a full game breakdown, see what the player does when the play isn't to them. Because I mean, like that's it's not an intangible because it can be measured, but like that stuff matters to a bunch of coaches. How are wide receivers willing to block, that sort of thing? And then I like to also fuse that with the highlight tapes that people out there cut up, because I want to see the absolute best of the best that this player can possibly do. Because I remember watching Zach Evans, running back, highlights for, last year when I was doing the scouting process, because, we're full-time NFL until this point. I'm just getting introduced to these guys, but several people on draft Twitter were infatuated with Zach Evans. Great. I love, seeing a new player. Let's see what he's got. And I'm watching the actual game tape and then the highlights. I'm going, what are people seeing? Like, this is blowing my mind here. Like, these are the highlights. This is not it. And then that, of course, that one played out in the NFL draft as he plummeted, and then plummeted in the real life NFL where all injuries were set up that Zach Evans needed to be the guy. And Coach McVay said, no, man, I need to go get someone who was already on the team in Henderson to come in here and be our guy. And then immediately cut him when my starter Kyron Williams is healthy. So there's a lot of things to put together, but it's a gigantic puzzle, and you got to remember to approach it from all over the place.
Yeah, makes a good point there, Mike. I think too when you mentioned just the highlights, like I think it's really good to watch players when they're at their best. But like you said too, let's also watch them when they're not at their best. And not every rep is that. Gives you the full story for sure. Just for me, like one thing that I always look at in terms of going from with the way fantasy is played nowadays, everyone has their own model. Kyle, which they say, which is just a spreadsheet. They have stats and numbers, of course.
Bro, come on, take it easy. We got a model too. The DFS or the Dynasty Pass, in fact, uses a model.
Such nerds. And those things matter. But remember, like, there is a part of this that comes from just the game of football on the field. So when you watch a player, does it match what you're seeing in terms of the box scores and the results? And what I mean by that is just, are players' touches and yards real life, big boy NFL routes, specifically for wide receivers? Like, are they actually getting routes down the field? Are they running complex routes, different sides of the field, in the slot, on the perimeter, et cetera, et cetera? Or are they just kind of these like manufactured touch sort of guys, kind of that are like, the Quentin Johnsons of last year or the Jalen Hyatts of last year that we were kind of, not down on, but just concerned about, saying, look, like there's kind of a gap between the talent level and the plays that the college, coaches ask these guys to run compared to JSNs of the world, Zay Flowers of the world, so on and so forth. So does the box score match kind of what you're seeing on the field, or is it sort of fluky? It's one thing I always look for.
Wide receivers are so tough for me because I was probably the lowest on Zay Flowers of this group coming in because I know. So dumb. It's just hard when I think about a system that a wide receiver is playing in and just saying, is this going to be the same system? So, when you look at yak plays, you have to think about it differently. It's like when San Francisco drafted Debo, I remember thinking, like, what are they doing? Because they drafted him pretty early in the second round out of South Carolina. I was like, how are they going to use this guy? And it fit their system. That's like what they knew to do. Where, you look at other players, you're like, okay, are they ever going to work as a, jump ball only specialist on a team that like wants to run the ball, where they get like a 50-50 shot every once in a while? It's like how I feel sometimes about Drake London. It's like, okay, well, he can be used in so many different ways. And then half the time it feels like just a, 40-yard bomb that doesn't work out. So there's just, with wide receivers, there's schemes, there's, what they're actually good at in the way that they are manufactured touches. Like, okay, are you going to get a bunch of yak plays? I struggle with that. I don't know. Do you guys feel that way with wide receivers?
I'll jump in. I love manufactured touches. Like, to me, that's a strong signal of the team is saying, we have to get this guy the ball no matter what. So I do enjoy seeing that a lot. Where what is not great though is when if you're watching a highlight reel that's been cut up and it's just the player winning 50-50 balls, that's a red flag for me. Because if you can't separate in college and just gets, and it's not, I want my player to be able to win those, of course, because that does happen, but you also got to have good feet, good route running so that you can get separation, not just be bigger and stronger than guys, because the NFL, it's like, what is it? The college ball players are the 1% of high school players, and then NFL is basically 1% of the college players. So you got to make sure what they're putting out there on the field, is that actually going to work when everyone you're matched up against is an elite top 0.1% athlete of the world. So I need to be able to see you do some things, and they're, also got to be careful about that. Find other sources that you trust, which we all do that, because like Drake London had some red flags that were being shared, I think, unfairly, of calling him a 50-50 only guy. Where,
correct,
like, you could cut up a tape of Drake London only winning 50-50 balls, but then you're removing these other things where, no, Drake London's actually just a all-around good wide receiver. That's not his only thing. He can do that, but it's not his only thing. So, like I said, you're putting together a huge puzzle, and make sure you're not just focusing on one tiny piece of it and letting that kind of dictate your take now on who this player is and could be.
Yes, and with wide receivers, like Drake London can have a trump card of a 50-50 ball specialist. Like, he can be good, but he's also good at other things.
Yes.
There are other wide receivers who they're a one-trick pony. It's like you look, I'm going to give a shout out to my boy Marvin Jones. There are some seasons where he'd put up 9 or 10 touchdowns because those 50-50 balls went in his favor. There's other years where it didn't work out so well. Same thing with Kenny Golladay. Like, there are players that that's what they're good at. So let it be a piece of the puzzle is what Mike's saying. And my last little tidbit here is I always ask the question, what am I not seeing? And it's kind of my contrarian question, but when I look at quarterbacks, I ask like, wait, why is this guy never getting sacked?
Yeah,
is
Zach
that a
Wilson.
Zach Wilson's the perfect example. It's like he sat back there, smiles, just doing whatever he wanted because he had an elite offensive line. I had the same question with Joe Burrow back in the day because he just would always escape. And I just thought like, oh, is this like his superpower? Is this just what he's good at? But I think what you see in the NFL is like he can scramble. He can do it. It also has led to injuries too because he didn't really suffer that magical year at LSU. So ask yourself those questions. What am I not seeing? Am I only seeing yak plays? They're really cool to see, but it's hard to recreate those sometimes in the NFL over and over and over again. So lots of good discussions we're going to be having. Our eyeballs tell us a lot. Stats tell us a lot, but we kind of we try to take a holistic approach. I feel like that's been Andy, Mike, and Jason's approach from the very beginning is not just laser focused on one thing, but a holistic view, right? That's the term.
Yeah.
Yeah. So got a lot of good stuff coming up, but let's talk about these rookies and review what we think about them.
Rookie Review.
The way I approach this, guys, in my notes and the way that we're going to kind of talk about it is this is kind of like a little checkup. We are doing an end-of-year checkup on these rookies, these little baby boys, and kind of looking at a couple different factors. What they did for fantasy, which matters a lot, the historical context of, hey, in light of all the other rookies that we've seen in the last decade or since 2000, here's what they did. And then also talking about the team situation. Like we only have 1 year sample size, and a lot of times we can say, oh, they're just a rookie, they'll get better. But things shift and things change in Dynasty where if you're holding onto a player for a year or 2 or 3, eventually you just realize like, okay, this is not going to happen. So that a couple of players I just want to ask you.
Are you asking if I'm still rostering Trey Lance?
Playoff bound Trey Lance?
Because he is still on my roster, and I don't know what to do, guys. I don't know what to do with him. Because I know if I drop him, he will get picked up. And you're just, oh, man. Now I'm probably going to have to drop him. So.
I think just for the bit, you just have to hold him until he retires, just for the bit.
All right, for the lulz.
Yeah.
I tried that same thing with Terrace Marshall, where I was like, you know what, this is a bit for me. People know he's my guy. I do have a soft spot. If he went off on someone else's bench, I would hate myself. And then one day I cut him.
Yeah, did he get picked
better,
up?
right?
Yeah, he got picked up immediately.
Did he get dropped again yet?
I think he's hanging around on a roster too.
Okay.
I have him in one of my leagues where I just don't. I'm just stubborn. But Trey Lance, he's the only rookie quarterback from that class, Mike, that's in the playoffs this year.
Go get yourself a
That's
ring,
a good
Trey.
stat.
Yeah, 4 starts. It hasn't worked out so well. So let's start off talking about quarterbacks.
Speaking of not working out.
Oh
boy.
We'll talk about these in order because really there's a big 3, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then Anthony Richardson, who we didn't get to see very much. They were all drafted in the top 4 in the NFL draft, and then Will Levis went near the top of the 2nd round. The only other rookie quarterback that saw significant action was Aiden O'Connell, who saw 10 starts, which is just wild. We don't have to talk about him too much, but other than Dak Prescott and Gardner Minshew, he's the only other day 4 quarterback with 10 plus starts over the last decade. So shout out to
good for you, man.
For Farva to Mustache Man, Aiden O'Connell.
Give me a liter cola.
So let's talk with Bryce Young. Round 1, first overall. He was the QB2 in rookie drafts. Okay, so Richardson actually went first in rookie drafts, then Young, and then some guy named CJ Stroud, who we'll talk about in a second. But I'll throw out a couple statistics, and then we'll just open the discussion because, I mean, it's pretty much as bad a rookie year as you can have. He had 2 finishes inside the top 15 for fantasy. Not great. He was always under pressure. 42% of his dropbacks under pressure. He had the 2nd lowest PFF grade under pressure and the most throwaways in the NFL. So 51 throwaways, that's the most in over 5 years. And I was doing this math. I was 18% of his dropbacks ended in a sack or a throwaway, which is sometimes you want to throw away, right? Like, okay, the play is not developing. It's not going well. You want to teach a young quarterback to do that. But there's a quote from Hayden Hurst that I want to open up the discussion. He said he believed that Bryce Young had way too many voices in his ear this year. And I thought that was an interesting way to open up our discussion because, they had Frank Reich. They changed, they fired him. They had Chris Tabor, who was an interim. They had Thomas Brown, who was given the play calling duties later on. And then they have everything with their owner, who's been just a big, giant turd. So I'm just, from just a mental processing standpoint, what did you guys see on the field with Young this year? And is there a way to correct this? Mike, what do you think?
I think that's actually a pretty good quote to start there, because I will say overall, I think that there are, unfortunately, tons and tons of quarterbacks in the league who, because of the system around them and the dysfunction of the franchise, and you can say chicken or egg, of course, but like the coaching staff. I'll use Baker Mayfield for an example. Baker Mayfield, when he was in Cleveland, his rookie season, I believe he tied the rookie record for touchdowns. Like, Baker had a really strong year for someone who was thrown out onto the field and playing for a coach who should not have been a head coach. And then he got another head coach and a new offensive system. And then he got another one. And then he got another one. And it's like you see success where teams have found their coach and their offensive philosophy, and then that can be learned and iterated on. You're not learning brand new stuff all the time. Well, yeah, tons of play callers and offensive philosophies in the NFL have similar attributes. They're not the same. So the fact that a lot of these quarterbacks, I think, get ruined because of everything around them. I don't know if Baker Mayfield would have worked out had he gone to a great place, but I feel like you've seen enough Baker Mayfield throughout his career to go, there is definitely something there. Like he brought a bad team into the playoffs this year. He went on the road, or like from basically the couch and onto the Rams last year, and won some huge games for that team. So it's there. And unfortunately, I think coaching ruins kids. So that's where I'm going with Bryce Young. My concern for him is the system around him. And you can say that starts at the top, because when your owner is, we probably should not know who owns the team. Like, we should never really hear about them ever. Like, the owners you know about, it's not because good things have happened, right? Generally speaking. Like Irsay, he's in the news a lot. I'm not, the guy has some health problems. I'm not dunking on that, but like, he's been in the news a lot for bad things. Tepper, in the news for unscrupulous things. Like, it's, when you hear about a team owner, it's not great. And that's where it starts. It starts at the top, because they look at themselves as, well, I get to be in charge of everything. This is, my toy, instead of, can we just get some owners who are super rich and like, they're like, it's awesome. I get to own a sports team. I'm going to get out of the way. You bring me some success, and you'll never hear from me. I'll just sign the paychecks. That'd be great. But what's going on around Bryce Young, it feels like it's going to be a nonstop disaster. And he won't even have a chance to progress and level up as a quarterback. So I am highly concerned, because what I saw on the field was someone who feels like they're in over their head, they're skittish, they're throwing the ball away all the time instead of. It's smart to protect your body, but there has to be someone open that you can like check it down to, who can essentially take the tackle. Take the tackle for me, please. So I'm very, very concerned long term that Bryce Young, in the situation that he finds himself, that he is not going to be able to become the quarterback that I think he can be. And this is not the Stroud versus Young. This is Bryce Young had everything. I mean, he had enough to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL. There's enough there that a good NFL franchise should be able to mold him into, at the very least, a competent starting quarterback. But I'm worried we're not even going to get there.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of thoughts on Young and just the situation. I mean, you talked about kind of just the environment around him, right? The issue that I have is twofold. One, like Frank Reich was kind of supposed to be the quarterback guy, right? Like he worked, he got the best out of Carson Wentz. He worked with Phillip Rivers late in his career. You know, the list kind of goes on. And he couldn't really get the best out of Young. Now, is that his fault or what? I don't know. But it's just a factor of like, man, he was kind of supposed to be the guy. Clearly he's gone. So he's going to learn a second system in his second year. And that's troublesome. Like you said, when these young quarterbacks come in, all they know in life is success. They have failure for the first time in their life because they're the best athletes that came out of school. It really kind of makes you question, like, can they kind of get over that hurdle? He's going to have all those variables to overcome with a new coaching staff. The other thing is that there was like literally a quote from like the GM or the owner, I forget who it was, saying like they didn't think they needed to invest in wide receiver because they thought Bryce Young was so good at processing. That is malpractice. Imagine thinking you can drop a rookie quarterback into the NFL and they will just succeed without weapons. You cannot do that. Like even the best NFL teams lose in the playoffs because they're a weapon or two short. So he was kind of up against it from the get-go. I'm worried about Jonathan Mingo kind of ever turning into a thing. Adam Thielen will be another year older. This team doesn't have a first-round pick. Like Adam Thielen. Like how are they going to put enough around him to support Bryce Young to be the guy? It's just really concerning. So I'm down on him. Obviously, the numbers aren't great. The historical hit rate, Kyle, this chart that you have in here is terrifying. I'll let you highlight that. But overall, just really up against it for Bryce Young. I think if he does turn it around and become a success for the NFL and for fantasy, he will be, relatively speaking, I think, an outlier.
Yeah, if you sort on just first-round rookie quarterbacks and that get at least 9 starts, okay? I mean, it's really bad. His 2.1% TD rate is the 4th worst. And this is a discussion we had with Trevor Lawrence. You guys remember, it's like, okay, can he return from a 2% touchdown rate? He did for a sophomore year, and it was kind of up and down this year. But like the list at the very bottom, Kenny Pickett, David Carr, Trevor Lawrence, Mitchell Trubisky, Blake Bortles, Zach Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, Justin Fields, which as a thrower, you can point fingers at him all the time. For fantasy, he runs, so that changes things. Carson Wentz, Brandon Weeden, Josh Rosen. I mean, it's a dumpster fire. So I want to kind of wrap up this discussion on Young by saying my biggest takeaway in the scouting evaluation is that everyone came in saying that his improvisation skills are unbelievable. And I still think they were awesome in college. You know, he was comped to Russell Wilson, it's just on the fly. The problem with that evaluation, and I'm learning this myself, is it's hard to recreate that in the NFL. There are times where somebody's superpower, like Patrick Mahomes, to just improvise and just be awesome. It doesn't always work. So if that is the trump card that a quarterback has and they lack other skills, height, other things that I think we would...
Height is a skill now?
For him, it's counting against him. There's about 5 things that
an attribute. Just call it a skill.
Got to work on that, Bryce. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Trait, skill, whatever. Things that I look at in a quarterback that I would already say, okay, here's why we like Stroud a little bit more and why our camp was a little bit higher. Not to dunk on Bryce Young, but if this doesn't work out on the field, improvising, here's why. There's about 5 other things we can point to. So you have to hold. You're not going to try to trade for him low. It's just, it is what it is, right? And you hope that there's a bounce back, but this team is already behind the 8 ball with their picks in 2024. Or, I mean, remember what they gave up. They gave up Caleb Williams, essentially, DJ Moore, another pick, a round 2 pick, and then a future round 2 pick. Like they've given up so much to bank on this being a hit. So
it's a dangerous game, man. It's a dangerous game trading up for a quarterback because that quarterback has to be so overwhelmingly good that they can overcome these deficiencies that you're already starting the team in a negative space.
Right. And you're talking about Lance, you're talking about all these other quarterbacks that teams have traded up for. And we'll have some studies out because just based on anecdote alone, I feel like it hasn't worked out well when you've traded the house to move up. Bears moving up a spot to get Trubisky.
Oh, man, what a heist.
I know. All right, let's take a break and we'll talk about our boy CJ.
Hey, this is Peter Schrager from the podcast The Season with Peter Schrager, and it is football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver you foam fingers? No. Chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs, no. Ribs, yes. Blitzes, no. Beers, yes. Defense, no. Deodorant, yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers? The kind with the delicious apple filling? Yes. Because that's groceries. And you can get those delivered with Uber Eats, too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part, you can get it all without missing a second of the action on your TV. And there you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. You can get alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See the app for details.
Whether you're cheering on your favorite team or hosting a movie night, DiGiorno knows planning a winning watch party on a budget isn't easy. You need the perfect setting, the perfect squad, the perfect eats, and the perfect plan to keep everyone pumped all night long. So why would you fumble to play by ordering delivery? The wait times, the fees, the cold food, it can't outdo the delicious fresh-baked taste of DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza, especially on game night. No, you need to draw up the perfect plan. Luckily, you're a game time mastermind, and you know that grabbing a DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza is one call that brings home a W. With half a pound of cheese, sauce, and other toppings at an incredible price, it's your game day MVP, most valuable pizza. So, are you ready for a big W at your next watch party? Don't take any chances. Make the right call and grab a DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza from the grocery store today. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
We're back, and we have to talk about our boy, Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV. CJ Stroud is the hotness right now, leading the Texans to the playoffs. And, man, so for fantasy, you look at it season long, he finishes QB 11. That's a really good rookie year. It's not great for fantasy. Like, he probably had like 3 or 4 games that were really difference makers, including that one against Tampa Bay that we all remember. That was just one of the games of the year. That was awesome. But the thing that I love about Stroud is that he didn't shy away from chucking it deep, second most air yards per pass attempt in the league, and then also did the thing that we had this conversation almost a year ago, is he slays in the intermediate area of the field, and he slays against zone coverage, and that's what the NFL is these days. So he has the 4th most intermediate completions in the NFL, and the most by a rookie since Jameis in 2015, and Jameis just got to throw forever. So, Betz, I'll start the conversation with you. Would you put this season as arguably one of the greatest rookie quarterback seasons of all time?
Of all time? That's saying something. I think it's in the conversation, certainly, especially when you consider, he lost Tank Dell for a majority of the year. Nico Collins was in and out of the lineup multiple times. Noah Brown was in and out of the lineup multiple times. When you can put all that context around it, and the offensive line was a liability most of the year, right? Like, they were down kind of 3 of 5 starters for most of the year. At times, they were down all 5 starters at certain games throughout the year. So Stroud was kind of able to weather that storm and obviously put up great numbers, not every week, but enough that you're like, man, he's a dude. He's their starter moving forward, and he's a locked-in dynasty asset, as far as I'm concerned for fantasy. We had a question, Kyle. I don't know if you saw, someone tagged us on X maybe a week ago, just saying, like, what is CJ Stroud's value right now in Dynasty Superflex? That's a great question. And I thought about it, and I was like, there's obviously a handful of guys I'd probably prefer above him, but I got to like QB5, QB6, and like the names are running out pretty quickly. So where do you guys have him if you would think about him as an overall startup pick?
Well, I was going to try and save my hot take for the next guy, but I guess you kind of have got to fuse the conversation. Would you trade CJ Stroud right now for Anthony Richardson? Because I think that might be the smart play.
Like, as in, you'd rather have Richardson.
Right. This is a fantasy conversation. This is not my franchise quarterback, because I think that, that's still out. The jury is still out for Anthony Richardson. Can he stay healthy? That is certainly a concern of, we got 4 games. He was knocked out of 2 of them, and one of them was a season-ending injury. So can he learn his lesson from that? But what is C.J. Stroud is such a good conversation because he seems like he's going to be a tremendous pocket passer. The yardage was incredible, over 4,000, but only 23 touchdowns. Still a rookie. That number can definitely go up. But when we look at these pocket pass, like if all you do is, really pocket pass, it takes special spike years, and they don't happen every year, unless somehow he turns into like Aaron Rodgers, where you're just consistently putting up mid-30s in touchdowns, then you can be a difference maker for fantasy football. But if you're hitting 4,000 yards and you're in the mid-20s of passing touchdowns, that's whole hum. Like that is not going to get it done, because that will, and on the long run, that'll end up only being 4 or 5 special weeks, where Anthony Richardson, with the rushing capability and what that team is doing, is it's not as, it obviously didn't end up as great as the Texans year, but what Steichen did with the Indianapolis Colts with a backup quarterback, taking them on to the verge of the playoffs, like that team is definitely on the rise. So fantasy-wise, I think that there is a strong case to be made that despite only seeing Anthony Richardson for what, I mean, the equivalent of basically 2-point-something games or so.
Yeah.
But that guy looks immediately like a fantasy superstar, where C.J. Stroud looks like he's going to be a great quarterback. But can he make that jump? Because, even guys like Joe Burrow, when they're surrounded by talent, Joe Burrow doesn't always come through.
That's a good point. That's actually the name. I kind of comp him to that. Like I see that as his, I guess, high-end outcome of like if Stroud
then we got to get T.
Burrow,
Higgins on this team.
If he turns into Joe Burrow over the next 5-6 years, you're thrilled with getting him as a rookie, right?
Yeah, then the trade would be, if he turned into a Joe Burrow type, trading Stroud for Richardson would end up being dumb.
Right. But I don't think you're ever getting
high end.
I don't think you're ever getting a QB2 season out of Stroud, unless an outlier insane touchdown year happens. Like you said, with Richardson, you have a legit shot at a top 2, top 3 finish every year if what we put on the field as a rookie is sticky moving forward. He led the NFL all QBs in fantasy points per dropback. Obviously a small sample, but if he's going to run, man, he's going to put up a ton of points.
Yeah, in his 2 full games, Richardson had 10 carries in each of those. It's QB4, QB2, so it's breaking fantasy when you run like that. I think it's more of a conversation in this second tier of dynasty quarterbacks. So in tier 1, we've kind of talked about Hurts, Allen, Mahomes. If you want to put Lamar there, that's fine, but in this tier 2, it's like Lamar, Burrow, Herbert, and then if Stroud, Richardson, all kind of
Stroud versus Herbert. That's a fun conversation.
Especially because didn't Herbert, his second year, you guys can look this up, like didn't he have a down year in terms of touchdowns and TD rate?
Yes, I believe that is correct. Let me pull up those numbers. So his rookie year, which was redonkulous, the second year was great. So the rookie year was 4,331. The next year was 5,038. So that's that outlier you need to get the quarterback too. But then same quarterback, played all 17 games, threw the ball even more. 672 attempts as a sophomore, 699 in his third year. Yardage went down and touchdowns plummeted from 38 to 25. And then only 20 this year, but and I guess the year 3 did have the rib injury, so there's always some context involved. But that's part of the point, is even these guys who are viewed as elite, like Justin Herbert, I bet you go even just a year ago, a lot of people are going to be talking about, well, no, Justin Herbert should be in that tier 1, Kyle, that you're talking about. He should be right there with Joe Burrow. But should he be? So it's like C.J. Stroud or Justin Herbert. What would you do right now?
Pretty pessimistic as someone who likes the Chargers, knowing that their weapons are turning over. But yeah, it's a TD rate conversation. I think I just leaned Stroud based on youth, he supported here's a fun stat. He's the first rookie ever to support 2 top 15 wide receivers in points per game, which is, Collins was wide receiver 6 in points per game. Tank Dell was 15. It's hard to do that with such a young core, and the crew's coming back. So I think I lean Stroud.
I do too.
Yeah, that's wild. And I feel like, do you think that's a trade that you can get done and get a little something extra?
It's hard right now to think, trading Stroud in the midst of this playoff run. So
maybe wait a couple months.
I think you can wait. I think Herbert's value will go down in just a hot second. So that just makes it hard. I think Richardson is one of the players that his value is lower right now. And so he is a player that you can go off because he just hasn't been on people's minds. Like even watching that game, that Colts-Texans game, you see him on the sideline. He's cheering them on. He's excited.
Go get him.
This guy broke fantasy. And for a while, I took him in a Superflex league ahead of Stroud. And I was kicking myself for a while. And I was like, wait a second. This guy was incredibly good. And I gave this statistic before, and I'll share it again. Every rookie that crosses the 80 rushing attempts threshold, and he was averaging a ton, so he would have clearly gotten over the 80 threshold, they are top 10 every single time. And he was top 10 in points per game when he played. I think if you get a full season out of Richardson, I think the ceiling is just way higher. And so in Dynasty, that's probably how I'll play. It's like, I'm just going to shoot for the moon with Richardson. Well, I know Stroud will be solid, but like Betz mentioned, like QB2 doesn't feel like it's in Stroud's realm of possibility. Like Richardson could have a Jalen Hurts season with Shane Steichen and have 15 rushing touchdowns and throw for 15 to 20. It doesn't matter. Like he could break fantasy.
For sure. And I think it's going to
do the tush push.
Oh, they're going to do the tush push.
If it doesn't get banned when Richardson's back, I wonder if they'll implement that.
I think they will. Steichen was so familiar with it in Philly, obviously. That's the other thing, too, is like I have a lot of trust in what Steichen did this year with that team and that roster and a backup quarterback to go basically almost to the playoffs. Obviously exceeded everyone's expectations, crushed their win total expectation in the betting markets, and just a good offensive mind who kind of knows what he's doing, it seems like, right? You put that around a young quarterback and bring back Michael Pittman. Josh Johnson maybe takes a step forward in year 2. You add the rushing. Jonathan Taylor's now entering the offseason healthy. Remember last year it was the contract plus the ankle surgery. That's all gone. Like it just kind of lines up, I think, for Richardson to come out, if he stays healthy, have an incredible season next year.
Is it too much of a gamble, though? Let's say you have Stroud and the person has Richardson. I mean, you're betting on Richardson staying healthy. You're betting on him continuing to play like Stroud. So could you trade Stroud for Richardson plus something else right now?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. You brought it up great, Kyle, of like, just because of how goldfish we are as human beings, we're so far removed from what Richardson had done that you don't really remember it. And it was trending to be unbelievable. It's hard to fill in such a long gap of not playing, but you're like, heading into week 4, if you had Richardson on your team, you had to feel just like you did it. You got the quarterback who is going to break the draft, essentially, because you got him a little bit later. I think it's worth it because people are so enamored with Stroud, as I am. I'm not saying that Stroud is worthless. I'm just trying to be proactive and not rest on a quarterback who I think is going to be a great real-life NFL quarterback, but will just be fine. Like it's I hesitate to even bring the name up because people get real mad, but it's like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is a good real-life quarterback, and it hasn't always been incredible for fantasy for him as the quarterback. It looked like we were on pace for an outlier year for him, but when the ceiling is, when you see what the ceiling is, or your perceived ceiling, and then you can get someone who can be really a difference maker, especially in single quarterback. I'll put it in single quarterback, this is what I'm talking about. If I'm in a 2 quarterback league and Stroud is my number 2, I'm probably just going to ride that out and take that safety, what I see as more safe of Stroud versus Richardson. But if it's a single quarterback, you gotta swing for the moon and look at the teams in your playoffs. See what quarterbacks made it in, and see which it's gonna, because it's probably Josh Allen, it's probably Lamar. So take a look at that and feel like if I need to compete with those quarterbacks, try and get Anthony Richardson and try and get a little side cash.
I mean, they played super fast. Even without Richardson, they were second in pace of play. So it's a team that's trending in the right direction. They'll probably re-sign Michael Pittman, who's our boy, and we'll see that. Want to give a quick 5-second thought on Will Levis. This will all come out in article form too on our website if you want to look at fantasyfootballers.com. Levis had 8 starts. He had one game where he blew up against the Falcons for 4 touchdowns, and then he had 4 touchdowns the rest of the way. And my thought with Levis is he's exactly kind of what I thought, which is when he's under pressure, it's not good. He'll chuck it deep. His ADOT was second highest in the league. He took sacks, and that's kind of it. And so my question is, does he start for the Titans for all of 2024?
Hard to say. I mean, right.
Injury notwithstanding, I would say yes. I think he will be their starter.
I was going to say, I think they enter the season with him as a starter and kind of give him hopefully to give him a full year. We'll see if he can do it or not. Hard to say.
I mean, because they're going to have to bring in I imagine they'll cut ties with Tannehill. I don't know what the cap situation is, and then you're going to have to bring in the backup. But what level of backup are they going to get? Like, is it someone who can that the mob will actually be shouting for? Put the backup in over Will Levis. I don't know that there's someone out there that they would be willing to do that for.
Maybe it's our boy Brett Rippin Farts.
Exactly. If Brett Rippin is on the team, Will Levis will start every game.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about some running backs.
It's football season, and now you can get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do they mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game-clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers, the kind with delicious apple filling? Oh, yeah. Because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats, too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part? You can get it all without missing a second of the action on your TV. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Whether you're cheering on your favorite team or hosting a movie night, DiGiorno knows planning a winning watch party on a budget isn't easy. You need the perfect setting, the perfect squad, the perfect eats, and the perfect plan to keep everyone pumped all night long. So why would you fumble the play by ordering delivery? The wait times, the fees, the cold food, it can't outdo the delicious fresh-baked taste of DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza, especially on game night. No, you need to draw up the perfect plan. Luckily, you're a game time mastermind, and you know that grabbing a DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza is one call that brings home a W. With half a pound of cheese, sauce, and other toppings at an incredible price, it's your game day MVP, most valuable pizza. So are you ready for a big W at your next watch party? Don't take any chances. Make the right call and grab a DiGiorno Classic Crust Pizza from the grocery store today. It's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
We're back, and we're talking about Bijan and the rest of these running backs. So Bijan went round 1, 8th overall. He finished as the RB9. I feel like people are disappointed because in redraft, he was a first-round pick. So in redraft circles, he feels like a bit of a disappointment when you mix in Arthur Smith and the way that he was used. But as a receiver, Bijan was awesome. Second most routes run among all running backs, 4th in receiving yards. And just for historical context, his 86 targets is the 7th most all-time for a rookie running back. It was the same exact yards per reception as Reggie Bush as a running back. So as a receiver, he was really good. As a runner, he was good. He just wasn't utilized the way that we wanted him to. So I feel like Bijan will probably disappoint based on the hype, but the conversation we had coming in was this is a high floor player. And if you knew you were going to get 3 or 4 seasons in a row of being a top 10 running back, that's really good for fantasy. I think people were just hoping it was like RB2 or RB3. So Betz, any other thoughts or stats on Bijan's rookie year?
No specific stats. I think just kind of the one thing that I wanted to point out is just, I think you have a chance for this to be kind of the floor for the next year or two. Obviously, injuries happen and that sort of thing, but just considering like the coaching decisions that were made by Kyle's BFF, Arthur, Tyler Algier had just 2 fewer carries inside the 10-yard line than Bijan. Cordero Patterson had 5 carries inside the 10-yard line. Like, if those just...
The Patterson one is so disrespectful.
This past weekend, one of those came, I think at least one, maybe 2, came in week 18 with your job on the line. Just an all-time decision. If that sort of stuff goes away, you give Bijan an extra 4 or 5 chances inside the 10-yard line. You give him an extra 2 or 3 carries a game. You still give him the receiving work. Like, he has a chance to obviously improve on an RB9 finish and be a true difference maker in fantasy. So obviously no concerns on the talent level. The draft capital is still there, et cetera, et cetera. No concerns for me. Bijan is still an awesome dynasty asset.
And you get to play the game of who will be the coach. Hopefully, like really, really hopefully, they bring in an offensive-minded coach.
Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson.
Whoever you pull in, make sure they are an offensive-focused head coach. And then, who's the quarterback? I mean, there's some stopgap guys out there. I know there's a name, Kyle. You don't want to hear about it.
Don't say Russell Wilson. Do not say him.
Okay,
they're interested.
Russell Wilson. This team with Russell Wilson is better than they were last year.
Yes, for sure.
And that's all we want. We want their offense better than it was. What if Chicago says, nope, we're going to move on. We're going to draft Caleb Williams, and they trade Justin Fields to Atlanta? How freaking exciting would that be? I mean, that's
buying the jersey.
The offseason is great because we get to play all these hypothetical games and be excited for certain scenarios. But the number one thing here that we can all agree upon is Arthur is out and the world is a better place because of it. Because we have hope now. We have a path forward where Cordero Patterson is not getting 5 carries inside the 10. Gross.
It's just funny to hear it said out loud. like that happened this year.
Yes.
What a time.
They'll never see this coming.
No, and then sometimes it'd be like Jonnu on like an end around or something.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, just multiple sequences this year where they're like inside the 5 and Bijan doesn't get a touch. It's unbelievable. That is, as Betz, you said, malpractice of drafting an offensive player where you took him in the draft at the position that you don't need to take him that early in the draft, generally speaking, and then you don't give him work. It is mind-boggling, and so mind-boggling that the upper management said, you shall no longer be our coach.
The Falcons they picked in the last couple of years 4th, 8th, and this year it will be 8th. So they like that spot. So, it's a great spot to pick another.
They know exactly
Brock
what to
Bowers
do.
Or somebody. Yeah, Brock Bowers. So let me bridge this conversation from Bijan to Jahmyr Gibbs. Is there any arguments against Bijan being the RB1 in startups? So, like, are you still taking him ahead of Bryce and Jahmyr Gibbs?
I think so, but it's not an overwhelming. If you're in a startup and you draw the 101, I don't think it's an overwhelming fist pump in the air of, yeah, man. Like I'm not taking Bijan at 101 anyways. What I'm saying, you're in the slot of taking a running back because
yes.
Bijan, Gibbs, Breece Hall. I mean, I'm very interested in all of them at being at the number one. Whenever the rankings come out for the Dynasty Pass, just know that it's probably those three guys, and it's going to be a razor margin separating the three of them.
Yeah. So let me give you some numbers for Gibbs. He had 11 total touchdowns, 7th among running backs in fantasy points per opportunity. Really got going from week 7 on. He was the RB3 from week 7 to week 16. Basically averaging a touchdown per game, and then had some monster games, like 5 finishes inside the top 3 that you loved. And then for historical context, it was the 3rd highest fantasy points per touch ever for a rookie running back if they've seen 230 or more touches. So Reggie Bush, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, Clinton Portis. I mean, these are like great rookie season names. So I think what we saw is that he's not just a little scat back, they're just going to throw him the ball. Like, they fed him the rock. When Montgomery was out, they fed him the rock in other games. So my notes were just like, he met the expectations of what we thought he should be. He's kind of right where he should be, RB 2, 3. That's kind of where he's at for me. And I just don't know if you can acquire him right now. If you have him as a manager, he's gold. There's not really a point of trading him away. So it's like, this is just a player who did what he was supposed to do as a rookie. Betz, what do you think?
Yeah, he was awesome. And I know that people were a little bit frustrated in the first month when it was kind of a slow played situation, but they told us they were going to do that. And then as soon as he got his opportunity, he did everything you look for, right? He not only was awesome as a pass catcher, which was his calling card in college, he proved when David Montgomery was out of the lineup, he can be more than just a 12 to 15 touch guy. He can be the actual guy, right? He can get 18 rush attempts. He can catch 5 balls. He can average 22 PPR points, which is what he did in 3 starts without Montgomery. So I think you have some, one more year of Montgomery likely. And so that's kind of the only downside is like, does he really continue to get, touches inside the 5-yard line, inside the 10-yard line? Outside of that, he's awesome, man. And, I could even push back on what I just brought up too, if like, will he get those? Because by the end of the year, the split between Montgomery and Gibbs inside the 20, inside the 10 started to become pretty much a 50-50, whereas early in the year, it was like, okay, we're at the goal line. Gibbs, you're out. Montgomery, you're in. You have your role. They now trust Gibbs in that situation. And so any running back that can get a goal line role with pass catching, it's pretty much the recipe for success in fantasy. So I'm in on Gibbs.
I think the argument for when we're talking about those top 3 rankings of, well, if you want to go Bryce Hall, because heading into this next year, now that Bryce Hall is, fully recovered from the ACL injury, no one's taking Bryce Hall off the field. Where there will be games where, like week 17, week 18, where you're ripping your hair out, going, "Why stop it, David Montgomery?" Well, David Montgomery's a pretty good player, and this is how that offense likes to run things. That there will be frustrating moments of, it's not a Gibbs game. It's a Montgomery game, where for the New York Jets, if it's not a Bryce Hall game, it's because it wasn't a Jets game. You know what I mean? Of what did we get here in the final week of the season? I mean, the final 3 weeks for Bryce Hall, we had 36 opportunities, 22, 39. Now, a mortal man cannot hold up to that type of opportunities for multiple years in a row. But we know how the NFL views running backs. You kind of, this is what you do. You draft them, you wear them out, and then you move on. So for fantasy, I don't see a possibility of Bryce Hall being taken off the field, where Gibbs does have that outcome.
Yes. Yeah, and if you're doing a startup and you're looking at these 3 running backs, Bijan, Bryce, Gibbs, and you want to take Gibbs the first one, that doesn't bother me at all.
Fine.
He's so young. In 2 years, we won't really be talking about David Montgomery as a threat. So long term, I think Gibbs is a great high floor play with also some high ceiling moments, including this next player who is probably the highest ceiling player in fantasy football, Devon Achane. I mean,
I don't know what to do, guys. I don't know what to do with Devon Achane.
Any metric that we look up for the next, 50 years, we'll be saying, okay, remember that one Achane season? Because every single efficiency metric, he breaks all of them. And I mean like all of them, like yards per touch, led all running backs. His 7.8 yards per carry, most ever by a running back with 100 rushes in a season. I mean, it's just impossible to contextualize what he did when you have, not a ton of opportunities, 103 carries, 37 targets, but what he did with them was 11 touchdowns. So it feels like a fragile player, but it also feels like a player I want on my teams, and I have on one of my rebuilding teams that I took in the second round in a superflex, and I feel like I struck gold. For a team that's running backs usually are terrible for rebuilds. You have no running backs at all. And then when you have somebody like Achane, you're like, sweet, I have a high upside player that can win me a week any week over the next couple of years. He also could break next week. So
would you consider trading him?
I haven't thought about it, so maybe this is the right time to talk it out.
Because I'm with you. In a rebuild, a lot of the time, if you have high-end running backs, you're just going to feel good about, you're going to log in to your fantasy team and go, yeah, I got some good running backs. And then you're going to look at your record and go, oh, that's not so good. Because it's not a reliable way to build your team. It can work. I'm not saying there are, of course, years where it works and you have the stud running backs. But when you're rebuilding, factoring in how long can someone like De'Von Achane do what he did, how many years or how many players, I guess, don't look at it in terms of years, but how many starting spots do you feel like you are away from competing in your league? Is this the time, especially with a really hot finish for Achane, is this the time that you should trade him if you're on a rebuild?
My team is about to be the hotness. Kyler and Anthony Richardson are my quarterbacks in Superflex.
Oh, all right. In a super?
Yes.
All right.
So
I
I've
haven't seen
traded
Kyle
low
smile this much in weeks.
I know. It's great. It's the off season, so everything's great on your dynasty team. Everything's looking up. I got tons of picks. So, but Betz, contextualize his injuries, because I think that's what scares me off. And maybe I'm just like one of those people that's just, I'm ignorant of what really happened and can his body hold up. But he missed 4 or 5 games?
Yeah, he missed weeks 6 to 9 with a sprain of his MCL in his knee.
Not nice.
Aggravated it literally the second he came back on the field, and then missed the week after. And since then has been good. Not a high re-injury risk with that, moving forward. So it's not really a knock on his overall profile, I would say. I know that there were some people that said he's undersized, that's why he got hurt. MCL sprains happen all the time in the NFL, so no real issues for me on that front. Yeah, man, it's one of those things that it's hard to contextualize his season, because it is so insanely outlier. You can't even really compare it to any other player because of how, explosive he was, the efficiency on every single thing he did. Clearly we should expect a decline in that, but the conversation is to what degree. I mean, dude, is he going to average 7.8 yards per carry? I don't know. Maybe he will. Maybe he's just that good. But if he drops down, does he get enough workload to compensate for that is the question for me. So he's fun. He's awesome. He's super explosive. It's just a matter of the regression that's going to come in the efficiency department.
And he'll be a timeshare running back, because that's how, at least it seems like that's what McDaniel wants to do down in Miami. Maybe he, climbs the ladder and he's the number one of the timeshare. He becomes the Raheem Mostert, in which case, he would be unbelievable for fantasy football. But he will be in a timeshare, and it's a wild card. The Miami backfield is a huge wild card, especially, going into the draft. Who knows what they will do? But is Mostert actually back? Is Jeff Wilson back with this team? I think they were both kind of back on pretty cheap contracts, and Raheem Mostert in running back years is he's a dinosaur at this point. He is so old. So will Achane be the number one in the timeshare? Because that will be the thought process, and because the probability is on that. But there exists a world where they pick up somebody else, free agency, the draft, whatever it is, and Achane stays as that second tier guy who just, you're really hoping that he continues to have 7 yards per carry.
All right, I'm going to quickly give you some quick hitters. Would you rather have Devon Achane in Dynasty or Kenneth Walker?
Achane.
Oh my gosh.
I'd have Achane.
It's probably Achane, but that's really, really close. That's because of how bad Charbonnet was this year.
Achane or ETN?
Dang, that's close.
These are hard questions. I'll go Achane.
I lean ETN with that one, but man, that's close.
I have some awful anti-ETN bias, and I cannot get rid of it, guys. I admit it out loud.
The first step is admitting that you have a problem. Okay, the last one.
But I'm not trying to fix the problem. I'm just letting people know I have a problem, and I'm going to continue to have a problem.
Hey, guys, so I have this problem. I'm not doing anything about it.
I just want you to know that I have it, and you have to deal with it.
All right, last name here, Achane or Kyron Williams?
Oh, my goodness.
The GOAT.
I'm actually mostly asking this because I've kind of been reserving my opinion for Kyron, just kicking it down the road a little further. I think I'd rather have Achane.
I think Achane.
I think I'd rather have
Kyron. That's tough.
I don't fault anyone if they want to have Kyron. So, couple other rookie running backs I want to mention. Tyjae Spears.
Yeah.
Was drafted in the 3rd round, 81st overall. I will say he got more work than I thought he was going to get. He saw 50% of the snaps in 12 games this year, so that's a lot. And he's one of 15 rookie running backs since 2013 with 50-plus receptions. I did this same exact study on Rachaad White the year before. I said, okay, if you're a rookie and you get 50 receptions, what happens the next year? And the majority of them end up being top 24 backs or better, especially if they're like the main guy. Now, it's hard for me to project Spears as being the main guy, but the depth chart says
I think
he can be. So yeah, is that's my one question. Do you guys think, like, for instance, if he's the main guy in redraft circles next year, is he drafted in the first 5 rounds?
Are you talking it's a redraft?
Yeah.
He'll probably be a dead zone running back.
Yeah.
Maybe he becomes the one to emerge, because there's always one or two that do. I'm pretty excited for Spears for next year. Dynasty-wise is a much tougher conversation of, are you, as in, if you don't have Spears, are you willing to invest and get him on your team with all of a degenerative knee issue? Is that what he had, Betz?
Correct.
So, I mean...
multiple ACL injuries in college.
And it's like, I mean, if he turns into Todd Gurley, not saying he will, but Todd Gurley, we knew he was going to have, like...
In a bad way, Todd Gurley.
Yeah. You knew that Todd Gurley was, the knee would go. And it did. Once the knee went, it was over for Todd Gurley. So that's kind of the dynasty investment of Spears. If you're going to trade for him, do you think he has at least 2 years? And maybe he does. I am not a doctor, but I'm very excited for him in the short term, at least for next year.
Yeah, same. I think he's a really interesting player for moving forward next year. And then, like you said, kind of the savvy move to me would be, that's in his profile. And at this time of year, no one's talking about that, right? And if he has a good year, no one's going to talk about the knee issues. But if you do acquire him, just know the time frame to kind of get the best out of him is probably smaller than another running back. So if you go get him or you have him, maybe you capitalize, you say, look, I'm going to have him for this year, and maybe I get out, after a year or two. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But he looked good in his touches this year. Obviously, Derrick Henry kind of said his goodbye to the fans at the last game. I think the writing's on the wall there. The depth chart is thin behind him. So whether or not he's the actual, dude or just the 1A in a timeshare, he'll have opportunity next year for sure.
Yeah. There's also a case they're the worst team in the league next year.
Also,
so there's but he catch 60 balls. Zach Charbonnet.
Man. Woof.
He was taken as RB5 in rookie drafts, right around top of the 2nd round in Superflex. And it's hard to grade his season when you didn't really see a ton of opportunities. When Ken Walker was in the lineup, he averaged just 7.8 opportunities per game. So we'll talk probably about him more because we all like him. But is this a buy low spot for Charbonnet?
I don't think so.
Mike.
I know.
You're supposed to be our bright and shining light.
He let me down. He let me down in a massive way.
And now I abandon him.
It's Dynasty. You gotta be willing to. There's time to have patience in Dynasty, and then there's time to make moves quickly while a player still has value. Because what is the true value of Zach Charbonnet now? It lies with Kenneth Walker missing time. The team, I believe this will be kind of the norm for them. Pete Carroll's a wild man. He spends second-round picks on players like this, and he's like, I'm not going to really use him. He'll just be the backup. But I want to have a really good backup. So you're just waiting. He's an insurance policy for Ken Walker. So if you have Walker, then great. Maybe you want to go get Charbonnet on your team because he's definitely a discounted Dynasty player right now compared to where he was drafted. In one quarterback leagues, he was a first-round pick. You could probably send a second over and get Zach Charbonnet at this moment. So if you want to do that, that's all right. But that's all you're waiting for is Ken Walker to get hurt, and then even then, will Charbonnet be able to produce? That's a TBD. So he is a player that I'm more willing to just get the perceived value of him right now and live with the results of maybe Charbonnet turns it around because I loved him as a prospect. Did. And that looks like an L right now. So sometimes you just take the value you can get.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I will say, too, there's always something that kind of worries me about a player entering year two as a rookie. Early in the year, I don't think anyone was surprised that Ken Walker was getting all the touches. But if you took Charbonnet, you were basically making the bet of saying, look, I hope that he can start to eat into Ken Walker's workload and or, in the best case scenario, overtake him by week 14, week 15 down the stretch. And he wasn't even close to doing that, right? So there was no signs of that. I think the coaching staff still really likes Ken Walker, like you said. And, just for context, he only averaged less than 8 opportunities per game when Walker was healthy. And so that's probably what you're getting is somewhere around 10 opportunities, which is tough to be fantasy relevant unless there's an injury. So it's kind of a tough situation for Charbonnet with Walker in front of him.
Especially when he's not a home run hitter. That's not his profile. He's a grinder who can and catch passes and things. That's why we liked him. But he's not Achane, where you end up in a world where, okay, Achane's only getting 10 opportunities a game. That's okay because you're hoping one of them's a house call.
I liked your call, Mike, of, offer a second-round pick. I would wait until around the NFL draft because what's going to happen is there's going to be prospects that people fall in love with that they're thinking, ooh, I would take this person at the end of the second round. I mean, if you have the 210, I'd rather have Zach Charbonnet than the 210.
Sure.
So just wait a little bit. And then let's quickly highlight a couple other rookies that didn't have the same counting stats, but I think they're worth mentioning. I'll first start off with Roschon Johnson. 4th round pick. They took him at 115th overall. He had only 115 total touches, and it was a weird committee the entire year. Like 1 week, it's like Foreman is the guy. Next week, Foreman is not really a part of the team. They hate him. Then they're giving work to Herbert at the end of the year. But I feel like Roschon, my notes were, I feel like he had some juice. He caught 85% of his targets. And next year is the final year for Khalil Herbert. And so I can only liken this to how we went into the second year with Ramondre, a 4th round pick that we liked overall, didn't really have the opportunities. And going into the next year, we thought, okay, well, the veteran is the presumed starter, Damian Harris. And then Ramondre kind of took over, and they're similar backs, bigger guys who can catch the football. So I like Roschon Johnson. He's another player that's like great bench stash. I think he still has upside, but this team could be in flux if they get a different quarterback as well. But I think Roschon was fine. I wish he would have broken through. I wish he would have held off Foreman might not even have a team this next year. But
I think we're going to have a first ever on this show, Kyle.
Oh no.
Breaking news.
Speaking of the Titans.
Whoa.
The Titans have relieved head coach Mike Vrabel of his duties. I heard whisperings but I wasn't even going to bring it up on this show because it was just, really? You're going to move on from Vrabel but the NFL is a results based place. So, I mean, that all that talk on Spears, it is really in flux now. So, I mean, it
dumpster fire.
It creates a giant value swing on both sides to me of, what offensive philosophy are we going to get? Are we going to get a coach who is a one running back guy? You're going to get someone who comes in and says, no, I'm going to install my system, and Spears doesn't fit my system. So, I mean, like both, you know what I mean? Where the median outcome for what Spears you could have been looking at, that thing is now just swung wide open for the short term.
Did you guys feel like it would go the other way around where he's like, I'm leaving?
Vrabel?
I mean, maybe there's like a mutual part of this that we're going to get, coming out. We're just getting the news.
Maybe. It's tough for a head coach to do that because Vrabel will still be in football, I think.
Yeah,
well, there's
sure.
There's rumors that he maybe wants to go back to New England if Bill leaves.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Oh, man. Oh, juicy.
Well, we got a lot of offseason stuff. I know we're about to go into team opportunities in the Dynasty Pass where we talk through every single team and every single target that's available. The Titans will be a team that has not only a ton available, but are they valuable targets? So,
right.
Betz, I'll let you hit us with a name at the end.
Yeah, just wanted to give a little love to Keaton Mitchell, running back for the Ravens. Obviously,
you think he can come back?
Well, we're going to talk about that. The year did not end.
Sorry, Betz.
The right way. But kind of like Devon Achane, where it's just like, man, this guy is just insanely efficient. Led all running backs in yards after contact per attempt, number 2 in points per opportunity. Just kind of electric, right? But the issue is, of course, that ACL injury late in the year, which there weren't really any reports about it being an ACL plus, but based off the angle of his knee, I would not be shocked if this is one of those Dobbins-esque recoveries where it's a lot slower than you think. You throw that into the mix. This is a surgical date that took place on December 28th. So if you're thinking about, okay, this year, like, what am I getting? This is an undrafted guy that probably is starting the season on PUP, at least training camp. And then from there, it's just really tough for these guys to kind of regain their value. So it's sad, man. I wish Keaton Mitchell didn't have this injury, obviously, and I wish that he could be kind of a guy in our lineups. But the historical hit rate on undrafted guys coming off ACL injuries is quite terrible because when these GMs and these coaches have, first and second round picks that they invest a ton of assets into, they want to get you back on the field healthy, give you a second chance. When the undrafted guys or late round guys have it, it's kind of like, okay, we don't have as much tying, you to the franchise, unfortunately. So I think it's probably a good time to get rid of Keaton Mitchell from your roster if you can get anything relatively valuable for him.
Okay. I thought you were going to go the other way, because I was going to say, when Derrick Henry shows up, Keaton Mitchell will be pretty irrelevant.
Also,
for
yes,
fantasy football.
in case that happens.
I want to bring up Kendre Miller, rookie running back for the New Orleans Saints. A lost season is what you can classify this as. But the team still loves him. And we had a tweet from Nick Underhill, great beat reporter for the Saints, talking about this past week. He said, this is what we saw from Kendre all summer. The man can move. So we were very excited for him to come in and see what he could do in that competition of him versus Kamara, who was on the suspension. The fact that Kendre Miller came in to the final game of the season and did something, I think it should be such a sigh of relief, and it's huge that it was, all right, that's one game, but at least we have some proof that he can play in the NFL. It was, he was injured in the draft process. I believe he missed the championship game. Kyle, am I correct in that?
Yes.
Kendre Miller. So just kind of relaying all the things of why we were so excited about Kendre Miller, his body of work, his player profile, the model numbers, and the fact that a team took him in the 3rd round when he was currently injured, and teams are generally very scared of that stuff. So Kendre Miller next year, Kamara still can get it done, especially in pass catching, but his efficiency numbers on the ground have dropped and dropped and dropped, and Kendre Miller has juice. So I'm excited that we still have, he's not gone. He didn't get deleted because of this year. I think there's still hope.
You know who didn't miss that game against Georgia for TCU? DeMarcado. He was on that team, that TCU team.
All
he was
right.
alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, there's a bunch of running backs. So
he owes me some fab. Some
He owes us
2023 fab.
So this offseason, we're going to go through a lot of different content, a lot of different Dynasty stuff. So make sure you stay connected. And on Discord, we are still talking all the time. Go to ballersdiscord.com if you want to be a part of that. And we'll see you again next week. We talk wide receivers and tight ends.
See you then.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.
Introducing the first ever Grand Highlander, a mid-size SUV with the ideal combination of space, performance, style, and advanced tech. The roomy Grand Highlander boasts 3 spacious rows with available seating for up to 8. Its available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain unlimited and platinum trims delivers the power, acceleration, and efficiency so your family can take on any adventure. There's even a standard digital key, a panoramic view mirror, and a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen so you always arrive on time. Live life grander in the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander.